Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can build a panel of AI experts using a combination of GraphRAG technology from InfraNodus and n8n automation tool. So normally when you build an AI workflow, you needed to have access to some context, and usually you would add a vector store knowledge base to your AI workflows, but that is very complicated to set up. So this is why we built an InfraNodus n8n node that you can use directly inside the n8n automation tool that you see right now on your screen, that basically gets access to the underlying knowledge represented as a knowledge graph, as you can see right now on the screen, where AI understands the topical structure of that knowledge and can extract information based on your query. So for example, if you're asking something about market and approach, for instance, it would kind of zoom in onto this part of the graph, as you can see right now, and then find the relevant statements that belong to these particular topics, and then feed them back to the AI model in the n8n workflow and provide that additional context to the model so that it can provide better answers for you. And in this video, I'm going to demonstrate some of the workflows that you can use together with InfraNodus and n8n in order to achieve some really interesting results and to basically have a panel of experts available to your AI. For example, let's say here I have a very simple workflow where a chat message arrives to an AI agent, and this AI agent has access to two different experts. One is the expert in cognitive variability, so that is a graph that's based on the text that I wrote that explains how to transform the flow of the conversation in an interesting direction. And another one is an expert on radical embodied cognitive science that brings in the body into equation. So then we combine the information from those two graphs. I'll show you how it works. And then your AI agent will provide a much better response based on the knowledge that you specified. So you can really combine different experts like this. For instance, if you're creating marketing workflows, you could connect one graph that is your knowledge base, for instance, with the support articles, and another graph with some guidelines on the style of the answers and responses that AI should provide. And then it would be able to kind of extract those two different bits of information and then provide a much more interesting response to your customer. So I find this very interesting because it's like a concilium of different experts that you make available in your AI tools. And if you use n8n, you can later expose it to the outside world using a link, and then people would be able to just access it in a normal chat interface like this, or you could embed it to your website, or simply use it internally as well. And then there are more complex workflows, like for example this one. I find it very interesting because first the message arrives, and then we're using the expert in cognitive variability to provide a structured response that tells the model how it should be acting next. So instead of using it as a black box like we had it here, we actually have much more granular control over the output. So we ask it to provide a response that tells it, okay, now you're in that state, but you can switch to another state. And then once it has this response, then it will continue to the other AI agent that will then use this feedback from the first expert to generate a research question using the InfraNodus n8n node that generates research questions based on the database that you provide without the need of any vector stores. And then it sends that research question back to the knowledge base to generate a really interesting response, but keeping in mind this advice that it received from the cognitive variability expert. So it's really nice because you can combine different experts together and then generate really interesting responses. I think it's a very useful workflow for researchers, for marketers, and just for people who are curious to see how they can build really interesting AI workflows to ideate, brainstorm, and develop new ideas. So if you're interested, keep watching and I will demonstrate how it works in detail. So you will need two different tools here. One is the InfraNodus Knowledge Graph application, where you can upload any text, be it PDF files or Google search results or your own text, doesn't matter. And then you can visualize it as a knowledge graph where it identifies automatically the main concepts and clusters of ideas based on network analysis. So at this point, it doesn't even use AI so much, but it generates a structured representation of your text under the hood. And then the other tool that you're using is n8n automation tools that has the official InfraNodus node. So that means that you can use InfraNodus inside n8n to generate some interesting responses based on those knowledge graphs that you created. So just to show you how that works, if I open the chat inside n8n or using the external link, and I will ask it, what should I do if I want to develop my product further? For instance, a very simple advice. You see, it first goes to the agent. The agent understands that it needs to consult the two experts, one in cognitive variability, one in radical embodied cognitive science. At this moment, it sends a query to this graph, selects the concepts that it thinks are relevant for the query that you provided, and then extracts the relevant statements and the underlying graph structure to give good quality context to your model. So that's what's referred to usually as GraphRAG, because your AI agent gets access to a knowledge graph, and then it sends back an enhanced query to the model. So you can actually see it here. This was the original query, and then it received the responses from the two nodes here, and then one of them, for example, had a list of the different gaps inside, the main topics inside, and some interesting ideas. And then it regenerated the query based on those insights, and then provided the final response, which incorporates ideas both from this expert and from that expert as well, and then combines them together. And to set it up is very simple. I will actually show you using a completely new workflow. So let's go here in test, and you create workflow, and then you say what you want the first step to be. So for example, I like to use n8n chat node, chat trigger, that's how it's called. So that means that you can start the workflow with a simple chat inside n8n, but once you test it, you can replace it with the webhook, which means you can access it from the outside and you can create your own interface for interacting with this. And then you add AI agent here. So we're adding an AI agent. That is a very useful node inside the n8n itself. And it says here that you will use the connected chat trigger node as the main prompt here. So this you don't need to change. It's going to feed that question that you ask automatically. And then you just need to connect this AI agent to the AI model that you want to use. I use OpenAI in this case, the fast model, GPT-4.1 mini. And then finally, you just need to connect the InfraNodus graph that you already have that you want to be using to query this information. So for instance, here, I have this graph on ecological marketing. I'll just show you how you can create a new one so you understand how easy it is. You just click here on this button and you can either upload some files, which could be research papers, or you can simply copy and paste the text. In my case, I'm going to copy and paste the text, which I wrote on the topic of cognitive variability and how it can be used in marketing. And I published it actually recently, so I will also provide a link to this text above there and in the description to the video. So you see here I have this text. I will call it ecological knowledge, for example. Then I click next. InfraNodus represents this text as a graph. So we have a complete representation of this text as a knowledge graph inside InfraNodus. All we need to do now is simply copy the name of that graph. So I just select the name here. Then I go back to my n8n workflow, go to create a new tool. I search for InfraNodus here. You will see that we already have the official InfraNodus GraphRAG tool available here. And then I need to choose what kind of query I want to be making. So first you will actually need to connect it to your credentials. I already have the existing ones. If you don't, then you click add new credential. Then you go back to InfraNodus and get your API key on the API page. So you create a new API key and then you copy and paste it here and then click save, and it's going to connect to your InfraNodus account. And then once you do that, you choose that you want to get AI advice from the graph and then query an expert, existing graph. So that's correct. We have a graph already. And I simply paste the name of the graph, which I just created, which you saw here on the previous page. Let me reload it. Ecological knowledge here. That's the graph we will be using. And here is where I copied the graph name. And I tell the model to automatically generate the prompt for this. So that's actually very convenient. n8n node will automatically generate a prompt for this model. And here you can also choose which model you want to use inside InfraNodus. You're not paying anything extra for this. Your InfraNodus account will use the credits that you have inside to send a request to those models. So you don't need to connect any model additionally here. I like to use 4.0 because it's slower, but higher quality and more creative. And then once I do that, I also like to add simple memory because that lets the whole agent have memory of the conversation. And just because we can, let's also add another expert. I will add one on radical embodied cognitive science. So that's the graph on radical embodied cognitive science, a very interesting book written by Anthony Camara that talks about the importance of incorporating embodied aspects into cognition. And I like it because it connects our thinking to material world, and it's very useful if we're thinking about applications in robotics, for instance. So I simply copy the name of that graph and I add it as another expert. So here I add a new tool, type in InfraNodus, then I see that, okay, I want to get the AI advice from the graph, query an expert, that's the first option there. Then another graph, and here again I ask it to generate the prompt automatically. What's also useful here is if you actually give the names to those experts, so your AI agent here knows which expert to ask about what. So here I'm going to call this one embodied cognitive science expert, and the other one will be called cognitive variability. Okay, so now we have good descriptions of the experts that we have available, and the last thing we need to do is to go inside the AI agent here and then add a system message where we tell the agent how it should act. So we say, okay, you will receive a query from a user. First, always use the cognitive variability expert tool. So this is just a reference to the tool, so the model understands it needs to use these tools to provide an advice on how to develop this conversation further. So this is about a way of thinking that we want to apply. Then, let's say, and always use the embodied cognitive science expert tool to provide additional insights about embodiment. Generate the final answer based on both advices, incorporating them into one another. I don't know if you can say it like this, but the AI will understand. Okay, so now we have everything generated. I'm going to save this workflow. So we have it ready, and now I can launch it here. So basically I just go to the chat here, open chat, and then I can ask, okay, I'm working on a new fitness tracker. What do you recommend? Let's be very general on purpose. So look what happens. First, it asks the AI agent what experts it can consult. It understands that it should consult those both agents because we put it in the description of how this agent should work. You see it's getting the responses from them. You can even read the responses here when you click on the log and see what answer was provided by the first expert. Then this one takes longer because it's a whole book. So it retrieves quite a lot of information and then provides it some insights based on the knowledge inside that expert. And then you see now we have a nice response that is telling us, okay, when you're developing your fitness tracker, a truthful approach is to embrace adaptive, ecologically inspired strategies alongside principles from embodied cognitive science. So you see, it took the knowledge from those both experts, and now it combined them into one. And then it tells me what I could do from cognitive variability perspective. So I would think about my product as an evolving system within the market ecosystem. So integrating those ideas for how I can develop my ideas in the way that would also contribute positively to the market and help me find a niche. And then the next part, you see it's also using some insights from cognitive science, from embodied cognitive science, that I could design my tracker as an extension of the user body-mind environment interaction. That means creating interfaces and interactions that leverage affordances, actionable possibilities in the user's environment. So for example, recommending exercises based on location or movement. So that's pretty nice because it talks about the importance of incorporating feedback loops with the environment into this fitness tracker, and at the same time also searching what already exists in the market and finding interesting niches. Like for instance, here it tells me that I should address underexplored niches beyond physical metrics like cognitive or emotional health tracking. So for instance, maybe I could also integrate some way of reading your emotional state based on how you move. Like let's say if you're not moving at all, maybe you feel a bit depressed, so then it recommends you that you should move in a certain way to change your mood, which is actually a great idea. So you see, I just constructed this assistant for me, an AI assistant agent that helps me think based on the different expert knowledge graphs that I created here. So that's actually pretty interesting, and it's nice because it's querying automatically this interface, and you could actually do all that inside InfraNodus as well. But if you don't know how to use the interface, or you find this representation a bit overwhelming, then this is a great way to get the insights from these knowledge experts here. And then I want to show you one last workflow, which is more complex but very, very interesting. So this is kind of like an expanded version of that. And here what's happening is actually pretty interesting. Here we receive a chat message, and then we first ask the expert in cognitive variability to tell us how the dynamics of the conversation should change based on the interaction we're having. So that's pretty interesting because you see it received here the request from the user, and based on the description, it said, okay, so consult this expert on cognitive variability and then give us a structured response. So you can actually add a node that tells the agent here, if you turn on require specific output format, it's going to connect it to this parser here. So it's basically the same setup as before, except that I add that parser and I tell it, okay, provide the answer that will be structured in the following way. You will write what current state the conversation is in and state to switch in, so how it should evolve further, right? And I will always get this structured response from the model, which is really good. And then once I get that structured response, as you can see here, I already ran it, so I received the information that the user is asking how to develop their product using cognitive variability and ecological market principles. And then it says, okay, stay in the current state of providing detailed strategic advice on product development based on cognitive variability, ecological systems, and opportunity discovery principles. For instance, if I was stuck in the same loop, then it would provide an advice to shift into the next one and maybe explore some opportunities on the periphery of the ideas that we've been talking about. And then once it provides this advice, it feeds it into the next agent, which is connected to the other InfraNodus nodes. One is the expert advice from the knowledge base on InfraNodus itself, and then another one generates research questions for that knowledge base. And the instruction is telling it to first consult the knowledge base and generate research questions, and then feed those research questions to the next expert so that it would provide an advice, but based on the conversation dynamics that we detected earlier. And that's very interesting because you can combine different experts together. Here, it's more of a meta approach where we ask it to provide some feedback on how the conversation is flowing. And then here, we're using the InfraNodus nodes to generate research questions and then get the responses. And to add those tools, you just click here, InfraNodus, GraphRAG tool, and then you say, okay, first you wanted to generate research questions here. So you would just use this tool, provide the name of the graph, leave all the other parameters the same. So that would be the first node, and then the second one is the same expert knowledge, but from a different graph that we have using the expert node. And then in the description here, you would explain that, okay, you will receive the original user message from the chat. Then based on that feedback that you received from the previous step, now generate the response using those expert knowledge descriptions that you have available to you. So that's an example of a more complex workflow. I will actually publish these workflows and leave a link to them in the description to the video and also above, so you can copy them into your n8n and reuse them for your use case. Let me show you one last workflow that can be really interesting for the people who are working on marketing stuff. So I have here YouTube content creator, and that one is pretty cool because basically what happens is that it uses the YouTube node to generate search results on YouTube for a certain query that I provide through a form. Then it aggregates those search results, and then it uses another node that is available inside the InfraNodus n8n, which generates content gaps and topics. So you can basically see what are the search results that exist on YouTube for a certain query, aggregate them, then generate the gaps, so find what other people are missing, and then you feed that information to AI agent that uses both the marketing expert that we had before and the knowledge base on InfraNodus, on the tool that I'm working on, to generate a response on how we can develop this content further. And let me show you how it works. So if I click execute content and I will type in something about n8n workflows, for instance, and I submit, then look what happens. First it got the results from YouTube, then it generated content gaps from InfraNodus. You can actually see them here in preview. Now it sends these content gaps inside here and consults the marketing expert on what would be the best way to approach bridging these gaps. And here it's consulting this graph because I provided its name. And then finally, when it got information from this graph, it consults the model again. Okay, can I get something from the actual knowledge base on InfraNodus? Here it didn't need anything, so it didn't need any additional context. And then it provides the response to the user based on this information. Sometimes if the question is specific and it thinks that, okay, it would make sense to consult the knowledge base on InfraNodus, then it would use this expert and then add the response from this expert to provide a much more detailed response. So this is how it would work for generating ideas for content to identify the gaps on YouTube here, and then generate some ideas that would bridge this gap, and then deliver it to the end user, and you would see it in the form. So you see this like a long response with ideas on what are the gaps identified in the current YouTube search results and how you could bridge them. So these are just some examples of how you can use the new InfraNodus node on the n8n automation tool. I hope that it makes sense and it's clear. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you want me to go into detail on any of those workflows and explain it step by step. I will soon publish a separate video on each of those workflows on our other YouTube channel, InfraNodus, which I will link to also above. So if you subscribe, you will receive a notification as soon as it's out. And all those workflows that you see right now, they are already being published on n8n. So as soon as they're verified, which usually takes a couple of days, you will have them available automatically. For now, you can just download them from our GitHub. Thank you, and until next time.